Okay, guys, go ahead and get this copied real quick. All right, good. So, yeah, when I left you last time, I told you about the different types of resistors. Show you a couple of them. These are some examples of some wire wound resistors. It has the ceramic base on the inside and the wire wrapped around the outside. And look, you can see the value that's actually written on the resistor itself. Big old resistor like this, you can print that kind of information on the resistor itself. Well, let me show you a couple of carbon type resistors. Okay, these are some carbon type resistors, some carbon composite. What, is he holding up anything? I'm actually holding things up. So if I look at these resistors, they're not coming in clear. So anyway, if I look at these resistors, they're pretty darn small. You can't really see what's written on them, but you do see some colored bands around them. This actually leads us to the color code because you wouldn't be able to read anything on there that they printed anyway. So there is a color code that's used to indicate the value of these components. Now, this is a universal color code. It's not only for resistors. They use it in other components as well. They also use it in wiring harnesses to identify wires and that sort of thing. So you see this color code a lot. So go ahead and make sure that you pay attention and get this. So these little carbon composite resistors, I told you the mixing process, not necessarily all that good, but you eventually come up with components, but we got to be able to determine whether they're good or they're bad. So look, this is what we're going to do. So I want you to think of this line as every value of resistance there is, from 0 ohms all the way out to infinite resistance, a broken wire, so to speak, infinite resistance. So let's say the resistor that we're checking is a 100 ohm resistor. So that 100 ohms falls right there on that line, let's say. Now, these resistors, and if we look, we have one of our bands called a tolerance band. And we'll notice that it's a plus or minus tolerance. So that's plus or minus. And the tolerance percentages, and let's say this is a 4 band, and tolerance is gold, therefore it's 5% tolerance plus or minus. So this value right here on the line is the original 100 ohm resistor. So we're going to plus and minus 5% of that 100 to get what we call the acceptable resistive range. Okay, so what we're going to do, 5% of 100 is 5. Okay, so I'm going to take and I'm going to add 5%, and then I'm going to take and subtract 5%. Okay, plus and minus 5%. So 5% of 100 being 5, when I subtract 5 from 100, that gives me a value of 95 ohms. And I'm going to take that 100 ohms again, and I'm going to add 5% to it. Again, 100 plus 5 gives me 105 ohms. This is what we call the acceptable resistive range. Now, what's important about this range is when we go to measure this component, if our measured value, the value that shows up in the meter, if the measured value is between 95 and 105 ohms, that resistor is considered good. If I measure above the high value or below the low value, that resistor is considered bad. Okay, so we have this tolerance value, we plus and minus the percentage from the actual value to determine our acceptable range. Once we determine our range from our colors, then we can take our meter and actually measure the component. And if the measured value, the value in the meter reading itself, is between the acceptable values, it's considered good. But if it falls outside of that value, it's considered bad. You know, it's kind of like that sign at the fair. You know, you got to be this tall to get on the ride, but you can't be any taller than this to ride the ride. You got to be in between here in order to get on the ride. Well, you got to be between here and here to get on the ride. If you're too big, you can't get on. If you're too small, you can't get on. They're kind of like one of them things. All right? So that's the whole concept of this deal here. All right? So look, get that. Okay, so the resistor code itself. This is the 4-band code. There was a 5-band, but the only difference between the 4-band code and the 5-band code is an extra digit. So if we look at the code itself, the resistor has 4 colors, 4 colored bands. And the first thing you want to understand is which way you read it. Which one is the first color band? Which one is the last color band? Well, the first color band, or better yet, the last color band is the tolerance band. It's the last one you read. Now, if you look at the color code consists of black, brown, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, gray, and white. However, over here, the actual tolerance values are gold, silver, and black. Now, black's 20%, but I'm going to tell you, unless you're working on antique stuff, you're not going to run into any 20% resistor values. Not today. You're just not going to run into them. So 5% tolerance, gold. Well, you'll notice gold and silver are not part of the actual color code. So if I see the gold or silver color stripe, I know that's got to be the tolerance band. So that would be the last one I read. So you're looking at the color code, looking for the gold and silver, they're going to be the last band or the 4th band of a 4-band resistor. So how does this color code work? Well, the first color is going to be the first digit in the value. Notice that the colors have digits associated with them. And then so the first color is going to be the first digit. The second color is the second digit. Now the third color is called the multiplier. And typically you do multiply, you'll multiply times 1 or times 10 or times 100 or times 1,000, so on and so forth. But bottom line, what it boils down to is how many zeros you put behind the first 2 digits. All right, for example, let me show you. So let's say I have a okay, let's say I have a yellow violet, brown, gold resistor. Yellow, violet, brown, gold. So gold is the tolerance. So from knowing the tolerance values, gold is 5%. So it's going to be plus or minus 5% of whatever it is. Now yellow is my first digit. So yellow being my first digit, I'm going to look at my code. Yellow is 4, so my first digit is a 4. My second digit, violet is 7, so my second digit is 7. And brown, well, brown is 1, but this is the multiplier. And the multiplier tells us how many zeros to put behind the first two digits. So since brown is 1, I'm going to put 1 digit behind it, or 1 0 behind it. That tells me that this is a 470 ohm resistor, a 470 ohm resistor. So it's supposed to be 470. What is the acceptable range? Well, now I got a plus and minus 5% of the value to determine what the range is. So I want to show you something on the calculator. So here's my calculator, okay? So bottom line, what do I do with the calculator first? Well, that's right. I got to put it in the engineering mode, and I got to set it to round 3 places. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hit my second fix 3 to get my 3 places, and my second 6 to put it in the engineering mode. Okay, so now I got it in the engineering mode. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that value, and I'm going to just hit the 4, 7, and the 0. Okay, so I hit the 4, 7, and 0. I hit equals. It tells me it's a 470, and there's no exponent, so it's not a kilo, milli, or anything like that. So that's what I'm looking for. It's a 470 ohm resistor. So that's a 470 ohm resistor. Now I'm going to have to plus and minus 5% from this value. So that being the case, I want to have to re-enter the 470. So this calculator has actually 3 memory locations that I can store and recall information from. So I'm going to take and hit store 1. Notice a little M1 comes up in the display to show that you have something stored in memory. So that 470, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 470 and I enter it just like I say it. So I'm going to say 470 minus 5% equals. So I got the 470, I'm going to say minus 5. Now, percent is the second function of the 2. So to say percent, I'm going to say second percent and then equals, and it gives me a value of 446.5 ohms. So the low end is 446.5 ohms. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to recall my 470 ohms back. Recall 1. There's my 470 ohms. And then I'm going to say plus 5% equals, and it gives me a value of 493.5 ohms. 493.5 ohms. 493.5 ohms. So my acceptable range for a yellow, violet, brown, gold resistor is anywhere from 446.5 ohms to 493.5 ohms. Okay? And so here's the key sequence again. I took the 470. Well, here we go. So I took the 470 minus, in this case, 5, the second, and it's the 2 key. That's what gives me my percent, and then the equals key. So it's the value minus 5% equals. And then the only thing you do different after you recall that value is change this minus to a plus. So then it would be the 470 plus 5% equals. Okay? So now, remember the only difference between the 4-band and the 5-band was, well, the 5th band and the color of the tolerance values. Now, the color of the tolerance values, if you remember, was brown was 1%, red was 2%, and orange was 3%. That's going to be fairly easy to remember because brown is 1, red is 2, and orange is 3. So they follow those same basic colors, but they're percentages for the 5-band. And what introduced the 5-band is the actual process got better and better. So the resistors got more precise and more precise, so they didn't need those big tolerances anymore, which gave them the ability to add a 3rd digit. So it's first digit, second digit, 3rd digit, the number of zeros, and then the tolerance. Now, if you go back and you look at that, you'll notice that on the 5-band resistor, draw a little bigger this time, that there were 4 bands that were fairly evenly spaced, and then there was that last band that was kind of separated from the group. Well, that was done on purpose because that separation actually signifies the fact that that is the tolerance band. Because the tolerance colors are also part of the color code, you got to know which way to read this thing front to back. And so the way they determine that is to separate that tolerance band slightly from the other group of 4. So for a 5-band, it would be the first digit, the second digit, the 3rd digit, then the number of zeros, and then the tolerance value. Okay? So let's look at a 5-band. Okay, so this one here, red, green, black, red, brown. Red, green, black, red, brown. Well, it's the first digit, it's the second digit, it's the 3rd digit, then it's the number of zeros, and then it's the percent tolerance. Well, looking at the percent tolerance, I can tell already that brown is a 1% resistor. So this is a 1% 5-band resistor. So the first digit value being red, we look over here, red is 2, so we have a 2. And then the next digit, the second digit is green, we look over here, and it's a 5. Now, this is where it's a little different. This is a 3rd digit. It's the 3 digits, then the number of zeros, and then the tolerance. So this is the 3rd digit, which is black. The 3rd digit being black would be a 0. Now, the second to last band is the one that tells you how many zeros to put behind the first three. So that tells you again, red is 2. So I'm going to put 2 zeros behind these 3 digits. So 0, 0. All right. Now, do not tell me that that is a 25,000 ohm resistor. We didn't learn all those metric prefixes for nothing. Because we have to speak like technicians speak, we have to put it in the form that we understand. So we got a 25. Well, what do I? Well, I got to know. Let the calculator do it for you. So look, let me show you something. So I'm going to clear out my calculator. Okay, I'm going to enter in the 2, the 5, and there's 3 zeros up there. 1, 2, 3 zeros. All I'm going to do is hit the equals key. Hit the equals key, and it comes up 25.00 exponent 3. Now, what is exponent 3? Yeah, it's kilo. So this is a 25 kilo ohm. Don't you dare write 25,000, folks. We didn't learn it. It's a 25 kilo ohm resistor. So that's a 25 kilo ohm resistor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 25 kilo ohms, I'm going to store it in location number 1, and I'm going to say minus 1% equals, and it gives me a value of 24.75 kilo ohms. 24.75 kilo ohms. So now I'm going to take and recall 1 again and get that 25 kilo ohms, and I'm going to say plus 1% equals to give me 25.25 kilo ohms. 25.25 kilo ohms. Now let me ask you something. If I were to measure, if I was to stick my meter on this resistor and I measured 24 kilo ohms, would that be a good resistor or a bad resistor? Remember the acceptable range. If it's between the numbers, well, it's good. If it's outside the numbers, it's bad. And think of it like money, folks. I got $24.75 to $25.25. I actually have $24. Is that in between there or outside? Well, yeah, that value falls outside, is lower than the lowest acceptable value. That resistor, if measured 24 kilo ohms, would be bad. It would measure incorrectly, okay? So that's the color code. It's digit. Well, it depends on if it's 4-band or 5-band, but the number of zeros and then tolerance. And then you add and subtract that tolerance from the face value, and that gives you the acceptable range. And then if you measure a value and it's in the range, it's good. If it's outside of the range, it's bad. That's the whole concept of the resistor color code. So I've got a worksheet that's going to come, and the way the worksheet's set up, it's got colors of the resistor. You're going to write down what the tolerance value is. You're going to write down what the face value of the resistor is supposed to be. You're going to calculate that range for that resistor, okay? So that's the idea behind the worksheet. Now, what's going to get you the notes or the attendance is having the worksheet and having the notes from the board. The notes from the board are the big deal with me. Y'all know that. So get these notes copied and then work your worksheet, take your pictures, and send them on back for the attendance. Got one more little bitty section here on schematic symbols, and then once we get that down, get that in your notes, we'll call it a day. But hold on, we'll be right back. All right, folks.